fact, Saudi Arabia just a week ago said, we're going to have 8% oil less each year from now on. We've kind of tapped out. And maybe if we spend billions of dollars, we can cut the rate of depletion to maybe 2%. But that's the best we can do. This would require OPEC to increase production by over 15%. And it's not possible. Okay, it's already been said. So, but I want to tell you a little bit about this line because, there's lies, damn lies, and then there's statistics. This line had a very interesting label when I looked at the study. It said petroleum, and the other thing it had underneath it was NGC, and it had TS. So this is very interesting. So this line is not just petroleum, it's these other things here. So what are these other things? NGC is natural gas condensates. So there's nasty stuff in natural gas, cyclohexane, cyclobutane, cyclobenzene. These are really nasty chemicals. You can't really send it to people's homes and have it burn in the house because it's carcinogenic and pretty nasty. So they condense these out of the natural gas into a liquid by basically chilling the natural gas briefly. And they're taking that liquid and they put it in the gasoline to get rid of it because there's nowhere to get rid of it legally, otherwise it's toxic waste. And so now a percentage of this line is actually natural gas condensates. Now, the other thing, the TS is tar sands. How many people have heard about tar sands? Well, this is a very well-educated group then, because it's usually I get 3 hands. So in Canada turns out to be one of our major sources of oil right now, and it's not petroleum. It's tar, something called kerogen. So they basically dig up this tarry, sandy deposit, and they hit it with a lot of steam and a few other processes, and they melt the tar out of it, and then it has to go through several refining processes to be made into crude oil, which it then can go and be refined into all kinds of other things. But it's a precursor to petroleum. It's not petroleum. And that turns out to be actually another pretty big slice of this. So when you start taking out things that are not petroleum, and you're looking at 2005, we've already crossed the peak. So the only reason why they can push it to 2010 is they've changed the way they're accounting for oil by including other things. So you may think it's a technical definition, but I'll tell you, when it talks about oil itself going away, it's already started to happen. Now, it's going to happen slowly, and then it's going to pick up speed. And the reasons why it's going to pick up speed have to do with population. As people start to continue to reproduce and countries get bigger, they use energy. And the demand, as you saw, will keep going up. So we have to already 25 years ago, should have been working on ways of powering the world that didn't completely rely on petroleum. Quick question. Let's get into alcohol fuel. Quick question.
What's the growth rate of petroleum demand right now?
I don't have that figure memorized, but when you look at the expected new car registrations and new truck registrations, you're looking at a doubling to tripling of the current fleet by about 2025, primarily due to China and India. So how much fuel that represents is not completely clear.
Can I say something quickly?
Yeah.
I read about 20 years ago in Scientific American that there's supposedly like centuries of coal in different parts of the world.
Okay, so he's mentioning that there's a lot of coal in the world. Coal is not petroleum, and it's not as useful, and it's also a limited material that someday will run out.
Precursor, isn't it?
It actually, for 25 years, they've been trying to make gasoline out of coal, and they can't do it.
Okay, I just wondered.
They've been trying that forever.
Are there significant untapped resources in China and Russia that haven't been gone after?
He's asking, are there big untapped resources that we don't know about? The answer is no. Nobody's found a supergiant field in a couple of decades, and even giant or smaller fields aren't common hardly anymore. In fact, the Anwar National Wildlife Refuge in Alaska would only extend the world supply of oil a few days if you could pump it all at once, which of course you can't. So, we're talking about a pretty fearsome amount of fuel we use. Just gasoline alone We're looking at 160 billion gallons a year. And this number is going to come up a lot in what we talk about. So that's what we got to replace if we're going to replace oil. There's a lot of reasons to replace oil, but let's talk a little bit about history. Alcohol was a very popular fuel in the United States in the 1800s, before cars were ever invented. We produced millions of gallons of alcohol for lighting homes and street lighting and for some for heating. Alcohol lamps were the standard way people lit their homes in the 1800s. It was alcohol with a little bit of turpentine in it, which you can tap from trees just like maple syrup. And that gave it a nice bright light. And it was a very clean burning fuel. The other things people used were animal fat or beeswax for light. And, those are a little less clean. They make soot, etc. Later on, kerosene came into existence with the discovery of oil, and it replaced alcohol because it was cheaper to produce, but of course it was nowhere near as clean. History books always talk about we went somewhere from animal fat candles to petroleum in one step, and that wasn't true. The city of Cincinnati used to grind and ferment 12,000 bushels a day of corn just for streetlights, to make alcohol for streetlights. So we have a long history of making alcohol here. When it comes to the internal combustion engine, the first one that was used in an automobile was by a guy named Nicholas Otto, and that's not A-U-T-O, that's O-T-T-O. And he used alcohol as his fuel in the first internal combustion engine car. Internal combustion engines have been around longer and used in industrial settings like in mines, etc., and they use coal gas and that kind of stuff. But when it was first used as a vehicle, alcohol was the only fuel that was available. Petroleum hadn't really been invented yet. That came a little later. So the Model A, Henry Ford's Model A, ran on alcohol or gasoline. By the time mass-produced cars came out, there was some oil turning into gasoline. And what that was the byproduct of the heating and lighting industry that Rockefeller started. So the stuff that was too volatile to put in oil lamps, because they'd explode, it'd be like Molotov cocktail time. Rockefeller at night would dump into rivers when nobody was looking, basically throwing away all the volatile components of oil because nobody wanted them. Well, figuring out how to make it run in a car meant he got some income from it versus it being a waste product, and being a clever businessman, he made that possible in cities. So he started having places you could buy gasoline in cities. So the Model A ran on both alcohol and gasoline because there was more alcohol available than there was gasoline when the car was first built. If you went out in the countryside from the city and started getting low on fuel, you stopped by almost any farm and you could get distilled liquor, Applejack basically, which you could put in the car. And the Model A was a dual fuel vehicle. You could adjust from one fuel to the other from inside the cab. Didn't have to get out under the hood at all. Anybody here ever have a Model A or a Model T? Okay, so tell me about the choke.
No, it's been a while. The lever on the...
That's the distributor.
Yeah, the advanced.
The knob on the dash.
Right.
Well, the knob on the dash, was not truly a choke. What a choke does is it closes a flap that restricts the air coming into what we used to have on cars, carburetors. But this wasn't that at all. This was a long rod that went right down to the carburetor, and you actually adjusted the fuel air mixture with the knob on the dash. So alcohol needed less air than gasoline, so you had to change the air-fuel mixture. And the other thing you did is you adjusted the digital distributor. We had digital distributors back in the early part of the 1900s. It took 5 digits, and you had to go ahead and do it yourself. I jumped ahead a little bit in history from back in the 1910s, the Grangers, and jumped up to there. There's something that happened in the middle. And that was Rockefeller deciding not to compete anymore with alcohol. So he went and found a group that had been around since 1854, I think it was, the Women's Christian Temperance Movement. And he went to them with one of his, charity fronts, and he gave them $4 million. And he told them what to do. He said, I want you to make sure that alcohol isn't produced in this country. And they said, that's our mission. Now, imagine 1913, I think it was, at the time when this was going on, 1913 to 15, when all this was happening. You've got an all-male Congress.